cyclists. The vigilante cyclist who caught Guy Ritchie using his mobile phone while behind the wheel has boasted that he's caught 358 drivers breaking the law in the last years. This is Mike Van Erp. Now, he's allegedly been responsible for 574 penalty points and 35,500 in fines while riding around London with a GoPro camera to report drivers using their phone. The renowned film director Guy Ritchie was filmed using his phone while driving his Range Rover through Hyde Park last November.
Oh dear.
Hello, my friend.
Shalom. I don't think you should be using your text messages while you were driving. I saw you doing it back there as well.
There it is. Van Erp said he often spots drivers in traffic jams or by red lights before confronting them on video and noting down their number plates and passing it on to the police. Following the incident, Ritchie has been banned from driving for 6 months. Did the vigilante cyclist do the right thing? Let's speak to a fellow brother of two wheels, Dave Sherry, also a cyclist who reports drivers to the police on a regular basis. Afternoon to you, Dave.
Hi Ian, how you doing, mate?
I'm as good as gold, thanks. Now here's the thing. Look, I think most of our callers agree, as I do, that if someone's doing something wrong, then they shouldn't be doing something wrong, and therefore, the laws of morality say, well, yeah, if you get reported, then that's just tough. But there is something about your fellow vigilante, if you like, in the form of Mike the Bike or Cycling Mikey, that's upsetting people. What do you think that is?
I don't know. I thought I was quite good at it, but no.
You've got competition, clearly, Dave.
It is. You know what? He's doing a good job, bless him. At the end of the day, you got a good result. You don't go guilty if you ain't done nothing wrong. It's one less silly individual on the road.
Sometimes, Dave, it's just somebody in a massive traffic jam having a quick glance at their phone, and Mike is on it like a car bonnet, as the phrase goes.
Yeah. At the end of the day, he is what I would call a very disciplined driver. He said guilty. Right. He said the court time, witness, the police time. So he knew he done the right thing. That's good, top banana. You know what I mean? He can't argue with that. He's now learnt the errors of his ways. He's got a nice ban. He's got time to reflect on his driving behaviour. It only takes one split second to cause an accident. And people say, oh, I was stationary in traffic. You're still in control of the motor vehicle. And the scary thing is you can actually get yourself done for drink driving just sitting in the driving seat. You're in control. You've got a duty of care. You've got to be responsible for your safety and other safety.
But that is, to many people, they're upset or uncomfortable by that scenario, because although legally that is absolutely correct, Dave, and I'm not arguing with that at all, there is a sense that, hang on, it cannot be the same thing when you're just sat there stationary in half an hour traffic jam. You've got your car's in neutral, your handbrake is on, you just glance at the phone to see if your other half has sent you a text or whatever. That can't be the same as Dodge Pop McDougal hurtling down the road with his arm out the window and his iPhone under his chin. That's a different thing.
Ian, it's in the highway code, brother. It says...
I get it. But, there's lots of...
If we black, white, you can't argue it. The law's the law. You can't argue it.
Yeah, but you wouldn't go into a car park, would you, and start filming people whose ticket was like 10 minutes out of date?
How many people killed in a shopping car park due to someone not being...
But is it all about danger then? That's, I suppose, the wider point.
It's all about road safety. Listen, it takes one split second. Is it worth the phone call or a text message? Come on, man. People have got hands-free kits, Bluetooth. There should be no reason why you should have that in your hand. For years.
Okay. Do you confront people, Dave, or do you just film them and pass it on?
Yeah, I confront them. I have a hands-on approach. I can make them stars, show them the errors of their ways. At the end of the day, it can transpire. You can make a mountain out of a molehill. At the end of the day, you're doing something illegal. Don't do it.
But, I mean, is it for you or Mikey to decide what is right and wrong?
Just passing in the evidence. We let the judge, jury and executioner sort out the banning points and fines.
But then you stick it on YouTube and that person is kind of tarred for life.
No, they're there to be exhibited to what not to do.
But that is still a heavy penalty, isn't it, for messing up?
For every action, there's a consequence.
Yeah, but you wouldn't get that you could do terrible things. I could walk into a club and smash somebody around the chops with a glass bottle and I wouldn't be penalised for the rest of my life.
One that write the law, but it's just about being accountable for one's actions.
Well, I get that, and don't get me wrong, I'm quite entertained, Dave, by some of the videos, and Mikey is, there's some cracking ones on there, and I think, well, good on him, with impenetrable drivers who think it's okay to drive the wrong way or do something else that's terrible. I'd back him on that stuff, but I'm a little uncomfortable with the kind of village, the villagers chasing somebody out the village, as it were, because they are there for that is a sentence for the rest of your days. Could you not pixelate photographs? Could you not pixelate people's faces?
Well, at the end of the day, do the media do it? Do the papers do it? Nah.
Well, sometimes.
At the end of the day, in the public place, I know, listen, it's in this infancy, yeah? People get named and shamed. It's better than putting them in the stocks, you know what I mean?
It is the shaming of, isn't it? That is kind of the new thing, I guess. John Ronson wrote a whole book on exactly that. When was the last time you nabbed somebody red-handed, Dave?
Earlier on today, 2 in 1. One was a mobile phone and one was close pass. Ian, I'm sorry, mate, but I've got to drive my bus now. But listen, keep safe.
Well, I've got to go as well, so that's good timing. I didn't know you were on a bus. I can see now.
Points don't make prizes, and if you get a day in court, you can argue it or you can put your hands up, but don't use mobile phones. It's not worth the aggro, yeah?
Even when you're driving a bus. You take care, Dave.
Yeah.
Speak to you soon. Would you say that he did the right thing?
I would say he's a hero, because basically we have to remember that using a mobile phone whilst driving is actually a really lethal thing to be doing. It endangers everybody around you, whether you're cycling, walking, or driving. So this guy is a hero. And I think he's doing amazing work.
I'm not defending, of course, using a mobile phone because it is illegal, and I get very annoyed when I see drivers doing it. I just notice on his website, and I know this is still illegal, but on his website, a lot of the drivers are those that are sort of stuck in long queues of traffic. They've got their handbrake on, they're in neutral, and they're sat there twiddling their thumbs thinking, I'll just check and see if I've got a text or see what's going on. That feels to be slightly different from the cavalier driver who goes down the road at 70, arm out the window with his iPhone in his hand.
It may be different, but it's still illegal. And what the problem is that it makes drivers feel complacent in using their mobile phone. They get into the habit of using the phone in the car. And so therefore, cyclists like me, when we're cycling on the road, we see drivers going around corners one-handed whilst they're looking at their mobile phone.
Yeah, and that's a terrible thing to do. And I'm just making that kind of distinction, though, Donnachadh, between the sort of intent or the attitude, if you like, of the individual, the cavalier, versus the bored driver stuck in traffic. They sort of seem to be two slightly different offences.
Of course they are, but they're both still offences.
But lots of things are. We don't shop people for it, though, do we? We just use our head.
My point is, if you use, for example, the equivalent is if you use a gun carelessly and you get in the habit of using a gun carelessly when there's nobody around, and then you may actually do it stupidly when there are people around. And that's the issue.
It's not a gun, though, is it, really? I mean, it's a Nokia 810.
Well, sorry, far more people die from car use in the United Kingdom from killings than from
that's a slightly different argument. My point is whether or not shopping someone is his business.
Well, I think it's actually, what we're saying here is that we're actually trying to protect life. And I'm saying that if you actually allow people to use casual use of mobile phones in fairly benign situations that you mentioned, it is then endangering that they may use it in really dangerous situations where people are being killed.
With respect, Donnachadh, that would take a sort of psychological study to establish that, wouldn't it?
Well, it's actually true. I've seen people that 23% of drivers admit to the RAC that they're using mobile phones every day. It's equivalent of like taking one drink or half a dozen drinks, which is most dangerous. You don't know when something dangerous will happen. A driver may be parked. I'll give you an example. So driver's in a queue, stuck, as you say. He's looking at his mobile phone. He forgets he's on the mobile. He's in a car. The traffic clears in front of him, and a kid walks across the road, and he doesn't see them when he puts his foot down to start the car again. That's what the danger is.
Well, I mean, you could apply that to. I mean, I know this goes into the specifics of the law of using a mobile phone altogether. In some countries it isn't illegal. In other countries, it's more illegal, or the fines are steeper. It sort of differs around the world. But I mean, you could apply that to anything. The what if scenario to a cyclist or a motorist.
Well, it's actually explaining why the law is there. If you actually look into your mobile phone when you're in charge of a car and you start start driving again immediately, there may be a child in front of that car.
But you could light a cigarette in your car, and that's perfectly legal. Is often the if it's about concentration. I mean, I get it. I'm not defending that. I understand it. It is the law, but in terms of the law of distraction, if you like, I mean that can apply in many ways. If you look at the dashboard of a car these days, you've almost got a PlayStation 4 sitting there in front of you.
Well, I think we both agree that actually using mobile phones whilst driving a car is dangerous. I think we agree on that.
Yeah, I think we do. I'm just intrigued by shopping people in this kind of way as to whether this is the... I mean, we've got a little bit of a precarious situation, haven't we? Relationship between cyclists and drivers anyway. Does this do anything to address that?
Well, how do we get to a situation where we stop 1 in 4 drivers normally using their mobile phone? The only way to do it is to actually ensure that people, when they are doing it illegally, that they're actually held accountable.
I do understand that, and I think a lot of drivers though hear this and they go, well, hang on, what about your red light jumping dodge pot on 2 wheels? I mean, I don't know whether you're aware of the traffic light system, Donnachadh, but when it goes red, that's a cue for you to stop. Did you realise that?
I think there's 2 things about that. One is how many people have been killed in the last 10 years by people red light crashing? 0. How many? I
have no idea how many crashes you might have caused by doing it, but you're defending jumping through red lights.
Well, I'm actually stating that we're actually comparing 2 different things that actually, in terms of danger.
It's not death or nothing, is it? I mean, there's lots of big old spectrum.
And 24% of drivers, you're talking about 9 million drivers a year, drive through red lights with a lethal vehicle. Horrendously dangerous. How often have you talked to
nobody's going to defend somebody who jumps through a red light. I would probably lock them up, but I'd quite like to do the same to a cyclist who does it.
Well, I don't see why you'd lock somebody who hasn't killed, to a form of transport that hasn't killed somebody in 10 years.
Lock up is a metaphor for, you would punish. I mean, the idea that I cannot tell you how many times I've had to brake suddenly or even move out the way, more so as a pedestrian, in fact, because of a lycra-clad cyclist who didn't understand what the colour red was. Now, if you've got a colourblind issue, I sympathise with that, but I'm sensing it's probably not that. It's a cavalier attitude. It's the superior complex again, isn't it?
Well, I think people in all forms of transport have either inferior or superior complex. Drivers feel they've got the right to the road. Pedestrians feel they have the right, and some cyclists do it.
Are you defending cyclists going through red lights?
I'm actually saying there are good and bad people in all forms of traffic. Now, actually, we advocate that actually the law on red lights should be changed. In Paris and in other countries, what they do is that if you have a red light, the cyclist is required legally to treat it as a yield right-of-way sign. So if there is no pedestrian or no traffic, they're allowed to go through it to the left, and that gets the cyclist out of the way of the HGV truck.
That's only if you're turning left, because of the famous HGV left turn, which I think you're alluding to.
Yeah, well,
or should I say the infamous?
Yeah, I mean, that's a terrible place where many cyclists are getting killed.
No,
and that would be
a
real step in the right direction.
Quite why a cyclist would stick themselves next to an HGV, by the way, I've got no idea, but that's another story. And, of course, that's part of the problem, isn't it, that we are putting 2 wheels and 4 wheels in narrow road space in often Victorian infrastructure, as in UK roads, and expecting it to rub along rather nicely. And it clearly can't all the time, and that's why we see terrible things happen.
Well, I mean, totally agree with you, and that's why our top demand as Stop Killing Cyclists is for the investment that the UN says we should be investing of 20% of the budget in creating a safe infrastructure for cyclists on our streets, so that kids in England, only a fraction of maybe 1 in 100 cycles to school, where in Holland it's 50 or 60% of the kids cycle to school because there's safe infrastructure.
But they have
massive health improvement.
But you will be aware they have a whole different backstory as to how Holland became, a cycling superstate, if you like, which was more to do with petrol and oil than it was to do with the environment.
Actually, if you look at the history, it was a group called Stop the Murder of Kids, was set up by parents in the 70s who. We actually are Stop Killing Cyclists are founded in memory of those people. We're doing what they did, which they laid down on the road. That isn't
how cycling culture first began in Holland, as you know. But nonetheless,
with respect, actually, if you look at the history, if you look at the history, the protest in Holland led to to the formation of infrastructure. So their cities are no different from ours, and we can put in cycle lanes.
Well, and we have cycle lanes in many of our big cities. But is it not curious to you that something that is taken up by such a tiny percentage of people? I mean, it's a very, very much a minority. It's like billiards in that respect, isn't it? It's very much a minority pastime, riding a bike, that you're requesting that amount of money to be given to you for a fairly esoteric pastime.
Well, at the moment, a tiny fraction of the transport budget is invested in cycling, which means that the United Kingdom, proportionately around 1% of the budget goes on cycling, whereas actually around 3% of people cycle. So actually a fraction of the money invested, that's just by numbers. But if you want a country where you have reduced pollution, healthier population, reduce the pressure on the NHS, investing in cycling means that you end up like Denmark and Amsterdam, where the people feel safe in cycling.